Okay, welcome back. Another day has gone, and there'll be another one tomorrow. So, here we are Thursday night, and we're going to spend some time with Clifford Stone, who is back this evening to talk to us about more in the field of ufology that he is coming up with, and he's coming up with some remarkable information. He's got enough stacked up there under his name in guests, probably to do 4 or 5 programs. So welcome back, Clifford. How are you?
Thank you kindly, sir. I'm doing great.
Good. What'd you do today?
I downloaded
Did you have fun?
Information and studied the information I downloaded.
Just for fun, don't disclose anything you're not supposed to. Where are you downloading all this information? Is it being sent to you, or are you being told to go somewhere and grab it? You're getting a ton of stuff.
Oh, I'm getting by with a little help from my friends. It was just like, I did a lot of research like on Project Dinosaur, and most people think, okay, it was just a progressive program of coming up with that craft that we'd send out into space that could go ahead and stay in orbit for days at a time.
Tell me about, wait, you got me. You got me with Project Dinosaur. That I don't know about. What is Project Dinosaur?
Dinosaur was started back in actually the early to mid-50s. Mm-hmm. And one of the craft that they were even working on at the time was, in fact, a saucer-shaped craft. Mm-hmm.
Clifford, excuse me, who's they? Us?
The United States government.
Okay. The USG was working on a disc-shaped craft. All right. Propulsion?
Oh, well, it was...
Traditional or
it was
esoteric?
Conventional propulsion is the best way to put it.
All right.
But it was capable of doing a lot of unconventional things.
Okay.
We could rain death and destruction down from outer space. At that time, we were looking at putting weapons into space.
And this is the 50s? Remember, we didn't put a satellite up until after Sputnik, and it was called Vanguard, and that was 1958, I believe.
It was 1958, and it was October the 4th, 1957, that the Russians put Sputnik 1 up there.
Right. Prior
to Sputnik 1 going up, the United States Army, under Project Horizon, fired a missile, a rocket off, a missile off, and got it to go something like, 600 miles out into space, much higher than what the Sputnik 1 went, but Sputnik 1 was the one that did the orbit.
Right.
And, of course, the Project Horizon was highly classified, and it would be Johnson, at the time a senator, who was very angry and upset that when the Russians got Sputnik up there, that not even the members of Congress was aware of what was going on with Project Horizon.
Well, I would think they probably don't rank as top of the class, and it doesn't surprise me. The military would know, but congressmen, they're too busy with bribes and corruption. Right? Right. All right.
I got caught in a bind the last time when I was on the radio with you, when, they were having the strikes there in Syria.
Yeah.
And remember that it came out stating that the Russians had shot down some of our missiles. Well,
it wasn't the Russians. It was allegedly the Syrian air defenses, and they supposedly shot down 71 out of 103.
Yeah, and they didn't shoot down one. And I said, I seriously doubt that. There was a reason I said that. And to the best of my knowledge, none of it is classified from the time that I learned this stuff, and it should be common knowledge now. But the situation, I caught a little flack by saying that.
You caught flack for saying that not one was shot down?
Right.
Okay.
They later went ahead and admitted it, but, there was a...
Now, wait. I'm sorry. This is like Charlie Smith last night. This is interesting. Who later on admitted that not one missile was shot down? Who made that admission?
The President of the United States was briefed, and he went ahead and acknowledged it because he's very proud of that fact.
Trump. I don't remember Trump being quoted as saying not one of our missiles was shot down.
He did it, and also prior to him making the announcement, there was a briefing at the Pentagon where they went over all the data, and not one of them did it. Now, we were concerned because the Russians did have a missile that would be capable of knocking down some of our missiles that we fired. Mm-hmm. But they did not intervene. They took no action at all.
Right. The deal was we don't intrude in their particular airspace in Syria or the Iranians. We limited to targets that we announced 2 days in advance we were considering hitting. And it was a deal to allow Trump to save face because he had been shooting off his mouth. All right?
Absolutely. He had no recourse. He had to take some type of action.
Correct. So they made a deal. They got on the phone with Putin's people, and they said, all right, here's what we're going to do. And they said, that's fine. We won't shoot. The Syrians shot everything they had up, basically, at these incoming missiles. And it's hard to believe they didn't...
firing at false targets.
Okay.
I would like to go into that and tell you a whole lot more about that.
Oh, electronic warfare,
Clifford.
No, don't. We don't want you spanked, unless you like that kind of thing. That's a little joke.
I'm not interested in that at all, but I was just shocked that they would get a little concerned.
Mm-hmm.
See, I didn't know anything at the time. I got a call from a couple of my friends that said, we did a launch and the missiles are on their way. So I knew that was going on.
Right.
But I was working on stuff, getting ready for the program that night. And when you made the announcement that they said that they shot down some of our missiles, I said, I don't believe that. I don't believe they shot down. And that was right at the top of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got off, immediately I was called and advised about being very careful what I say. And if I knew that I was stepping on toes because it was, disclosing some parts of classified information, I said, whoa. No. This is all open source. But even when I was in the military, I'd, get involved in that because people think stuff was still classified. I'd start talking about it. I remember I didn't want to give this one briefing, but I was at the non-commissioned officers course there in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And I went ahead and I started to give a briefing about the high-energy beam weapons that the Russians was working on.
Uh-huh.
Well, less than 6 months earlier than that stuff was classified. The instructor was going around pulling down blinds, shutting the door and everything.
That's funny.
And he went ahead and said, I'm going to have to call people in to debrief everyone here now, aren't I? I said, why? You know what you was talking about was classified. I said, no, it wasn't. And it only took me about 20 minutes to put it together, because initially I was going to take a failing grade on it, and a couple of my friends said, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, this would be a good thing to talk about. No one's talked about it. But then I had to go and show where it was actually open source at that time.
Right.
But,
I don't, Clifford, I don't have the sources you have. All I can do is survey the primary credible media outlets, the governments involved, and try to ascertain what is the most logical, likely position to assume regarding the incoming missiles. Now, if they all came in and hit their targets, there are a couple of things. One, there's not a single report of a single fatality or injury. That's what happens when you give away a list of 8 primary targets being, quote, considered 2 days before you launch a strike. Everybody gets the hell out of the way. Assad was able to reposition assets, move things. The primary building that you see destroyed was apparently, we'll call it a pharmaceutical building, not a gas creating.
Right, that's what they called it too.
That's right. So I don't know, but I really find it difficult to believe that 103 out of 103 missiles got through and hit their target when we just a year ago had such a miserable performance in Trump's first attack on Syria with the Tomahawk missiles. So, okay, I don't know. That's the point. But you have sources, and electronically, maybe they could easily decoy the S-200s and the Buck missiles that Syria relies upon for their air defenses, have them go off and chase phantoms. I don't know. Maybe that's possible. I would say it is possible. Do they do it? I don't know.
Technology that if we want it to do good, it can do good. If we want it to do poorly, for example, we shot a drone satellite down, and this was back in the mid to early 80s.
Uh-huh.
We used a F-16 that had a high-energy beam on it, went ahead, locked on the drone satellite that was 500-plus miles into space.
The target, yeah, okay.
And he hit it and brought it down. Well, no one said that was going to be classified. That's good news. So they went ahead and acknowledged that it happened. Well, the people who went ahead and acknowledged it and didn't classify it because there's no directions to classify it, caught heck over it. And then they came out later on saying they were lying about it, that it was a total failure, it was a total success. But no, it was a total failure.
No, that sounds like what the Army did with the remote viewing program. It didn't work, we're dropping it. And,
the whole purpose with that was to go ahead and not let the potential enemies of the future know our capabilities.
Let's spend a moment on that. Although ufology is the target here, both the Pentagon and I forgot which agency, possibly CIA, NSA, somebody joined the Pentagon and said that they were concerned about the anti-satellite capabilities of China and Russia. We're all in it. We're all trying to develop our own foolproof, fail-safe satellite-killing technology, whether it be beam weapons, whether it be a kinetic weapon, it doesn't matter. So, yeah, that's the big game now. Can we shoot down that? And the answer is yes. I think all three superpowers are capable of doing that.
Oh, well, that was one of the big races right after the Second World War. One of the primary goals of Paperclip was to get as many scientists and technicians that worked on the V weapons as possible.
Right.
And you hear a lot of people talk about V1, V2.
There was V3 and V4. We got 9,600 by one count. Germans, I'm not going to use the word Nazi. They were Germans. They were German scientists, and we got almost 10,000 of them over here. And they literally created our space weapons and space program. As you know, the director of NASA for the first 13 years was Dr. Kurt Debus, who also happened to be Adolf Hitler's director of missile defense technology and offensive technology at Peenemünde during the war. So we were a German space program here. And most Americans have no idea. None. You do. Go ahead.
Well, I sent Frank a whole lot of documents dealing with the V2 and some of the V3, and also some of the things about the German scientists, where they were actually talking about creating a saucer-shaped craft. And one of the scientists that was in, I can't remember the name of the country, but it was in South America, stated that he believed fully that what happened was that they actually finalized the development on one of the Horton brothers' craft, which was a circular-type craft, and that these craft were, in fact, being flown by someone. And that's where you get a lot of people thinking that the overflights of 52 were German saucers. But, the whole situation is to go ahead and say that the technology did not exist at that time is totally, totally ridiculous. And I think one of the things we were trying to do was use that same type of knowledge when we went into what was known as, Project 1794, which was our effort, once again, to go ahead and make a dish-shaped saucer. It was also known as Silverbug. But what you see as far as the end product, where it would go 2 feet or so off the ground, that was not what they were actually working on. So, I had some of my kids from Job Corps went ahead and decided to take it on with the diagrams and everything that we had. So they made a prototype, maybe about 2-3 foot in diameter, and we test floated. And guess what? It worked. We made it to scale and had real living, breathing pilots and put into it. Guess what? It would have worked. So to say that it didn't work, and, we came up with something that even the diagrams don't show it being the same craft, what's wrong with that picture? Did we make something, and to date we've not said anything about it?
Well, I've got, if all of you out there care about doing a little tiny search at Rense, just go to the search engine, right? It's down there below my picture somewhere. There it is. Type in German flying saucers, okay? Just type in German flying saucers, and you'll find a couple of links. I asked Frank Chili to send this to you. Let me double check this real quick here. Hold on. I have assembled as many of the old black and white photographs that I could find from 1930s and early 40s German flying disc technology. It should be the top link there. It says Astonishing World War II German Flying Disc Technology. Just type in German flying saucers, and there must be 30 pictures there. And I've got some actual 16 millimeter or maybe 8 black and white film of one apparently flying. So you'll get those in a few minutes, Clifford, and it's fun to look at. It's up there for all of you. I can't get them posted that quickly. Just do a search, German flying saucers at Rense, and you'll pull up the page. It's the top page. Starts with the word astonishing. Go ahead, Clifford. Sorry about the interruption.
Oh, no, it's not a problem at all. But, the whole situation is they were trying to develop a disc-shaped craft that they would hope go anywhere from 2 to 7,000 miles an hour.
Right. We think they did it. We think they did it.
Well, I think they've managed making a disc-shaped craft. And the reason I state that, Horton Brothers was very involved in that.
It's interesting you would say that because the Hortons were primarily the flying wing guys. I never saw...
Absolutely. And it worked.
Yeah.
It was just it wasn't as aerodynamically as stable. But if you go into the CIA or the CIC documents, Counterintelligence Corps, that I sent there's 309 pages there. You'll see where they were trying to tie in the saucer phenomena with the works of the Horton Brothers. Then you'll find there were 4 documents. Once again, these were CIA documents talking about the German scientists that was hitting up on the fact that they were working and actually had a couple that were flying even during the Second World War, but it ended before they could go ahead and mass produce it and put it into the field for operational use.
Well, you take a look at these pictures I send, and the only rule of thumb I always try to put out there is, all right, I've got 30 pictures here. If only one of them is legit, what do we have? Okay? And I think a lot more than one are legit. The third...
the CIA went ahead and claimed they never took any pictures at all of UFOs, never collected pictures of UFOs.
I know. No, we live in a world of complete lies.
There's 2 documents that the CIA released in December of 2016 that are of UFO photographs.
I haven't seen that one. Did you put that up in your group?
I don't think I've sent those yet.
Okay. All right.
I try to go ahead and get as much as I can sent out to you because I think you.
Well, there's a ton there. The 3 data links under Clifford Stone's name. The third one is a scientist talks about German flying disc technology, part 1, and that's where you'll find most of what Clifford is talking about right now.
How important those documents were?
Those
documents had the director, who was Hoover of the FBI, at the throat of the CIA director, because Hoover was stating that the CIA was holding information back, which they were. Right. And this was in 1952.
Right.
And, of course, you had people in the Pentagon, high-ranking people, who said some UFOs were interplanetary craft.
Right.
And the CIA did not want that to get... If it got out, it would no longer be that the CIA had their hands on the rings controlling all the information.
Got it. Right.
And even with the CIC, CIC was initially Army from the get-go. From the time the OSS came into play and says, okay, Army, we want you to have CIC. But the 341...
Explain CIC to our... What is CIC for our listeners? Clifford, explain it, please.
Oh, that stands for Counterintelligence Corps.
That was Wild Bill Donovan and the OSS.
Oh, absolutely. And the situation is that, okay, it was Army regulations, a 341 series, that brought into play and into existence the CIC. But what a lot of people aren't aware of, when they first came out, they were still Army. There was one Navy regulation that tied in because Navy OSI played into a certain part of CIC. But overall, it was Army. Now, CIC didn't report directly to the Army. Their first loyalty was to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Interesting.
And, of course, people say, well, wait a minute, it was Army regulations.
Yeah.
It was Army regulations, as I said, but it was called Special Regulation.
Okay.
SR. And everyone just assumed, okay, well, it was still Army.
All right.
Well, yeah, it was, but Special Regulations was issued by the CIA at the time.
Okay. All right.
Initially, it was
hold that thought. Special regulations. I got to pause. We will be right back in a minute. Okay, and we're back with Clifford. There are so many documents that are available to all of you. I'll be putting them up on the homepage here on the right-hand side in the column. A feature down there for you, and you can go through these. There are a lot of redacted documents. There are images. There are things. Here's one that I haven't read this. So I'm going to read this cold. It's a little difficult to read because these are old mimeographs. They've been blacked out. All right. Proposed study on the flying saucers phenomena. Intelligence Advisory Committee, 1952. From VPK to Mr. A.H. Belmont. All right. Pursuant to instructions, Supervisor M.W. Kurtz of the Liaison Section attended the Intelligence Advisory Committee meeting on December 4, 1952. None of the agenda items are of direct interest to the Bureau. This is obviously relating to the FBI. However, and there's a redacted sentence, or half of one, directed the members' attention to some aspects of the, quote, flying saucers, end quote, phenomenon. He said that a recent presentation of a theory on saucers, this 1952, was made by a German atomic scientist, which fact has has caused the British to initiate considerable intelligence effort into this matter. According to blank blank, efforts are being made to obtain the German scientists' paper on this theory. Also, it was stated that a recent saucers observation in Africa presents some evidence that the saucers are not a meteorological phenomena, which theory has been held to date by the Air Force. All right, let me stop there just for a minute. That's kind of hard to believe. That 1952, the knowledge curve was really that primitive when we're 5 years after Roswell, we're 11 years after the Battle of Los Angeles, we're 41, 51. We're 21 years after Cape Girardeau, Missouri, the recovery of a craft there. So apparently at this time, the FBI didn't know much of anything about this. That's what this is about.
The FBI was trying to make it clear that the CIA was pulling the cover up on the entire intelligence community.
Right. That's exactly what this sounds like.
And there's a high probability that not even the President of the United States has been brought into play on what was really going on, which is true.
Right. Okay. Let me read a little bit more. In Africa, presents some evidence that the saucers are not a meteorological phenomena, which theory has been held to date by the Air Force. If they held that theory, it was a cover, I guarantee it. Instead, this latter incident indicated the possibility of the saucers being a scientific development. The details of this African observation were not presented, however. Appropriate contact will be made by the Bureau's liaison, blah, blah, blah. As a result of the above, the military members suggested a logical approach which would call for a group of scientists to make a study of the new saucers. All right. So this is the FBI obviously trying to crack open this big, deep, dark secret that the CIA, formerly OSS, was sitting on. Correct?
Correct. And also the documents dealing with the German scientists. I sent those to Frank. There are 4 documents, and the whole situation is that the FBI, they had already started it, and they told the FBI, or they told the CIA not to worry about it. They were going to do their own investigation, and that's what prompted the CIA to go ahead and acknowledge to key personnel that UFOs did represent a problem, but they were downplaying it, not that they were interplanetary. But the one thing that people need to understand is that before the Second World War, America wasn't all that active in trying to gather technical data on anything. Other countries, particularly Germany, because in order to go ahead and get out of the rut they found themselves in after the First World War, they prepared for the Second World War, which would break them free from the restraints that was put on them by the Allies from the First World War. Mm-hmm. So they were hitting up on it, and they came into contact with technology not of this world. We came into it, but just scratched our heads and walked away for the most part. But then, with the onset of the Second World War, we took it a little bit more serious. And our formal eyeing on it, and the other countries the same way, they were eyeing on it as some new development. And on our part, we saw it a new technical development of the Axis powers. The Axis powers saw it as a new technical development of ours. But the one thing that never escaped either side was that it was technology well ahead of its time that both the Axis and the Allies felt did not originate on this planet. But we were both in a battle to try to gather as much technology as possible to go ahead and exploit that technology and make it part of our own technology as quickly as possible. And that goes on to this day.
Oh, sure. Okay. If you go under Clifford's name to the 3rd data link there, the one that talks about a scientist talks about German flying disc technology, and you open that up, you will find a number of 4 PDFs. Part 2 is a paper by a German scientist, which I'm going to read a little bit of here. This is all very interesting to dig around in history. This is.
Oh, and I'll tell you a little secret about those documents.
Yeah.
They were declassified where they could be released to people, but no one asked. It would not be until December 28th, 2016, that they made them available to the public, but buried them in what they call the general files. And these are millions of files that unless you know what to look for and ask for, you're never going to find it. That's where these were hidden.
All right, let me read a little bit of this. This is written by Dr. Eduard Ludwig, and it was published in Santiago, Chile, in
1952.
50, yeah. Well, no, 50. This is dated 1950, the report, I believe.
Okay, the newspaper article was.
Yeah, okay. Here we go. Now, this is I'm not sure if he's writing in English or this is a translation.
It's a translation. It was in German.
All right. This is long, I'm just going to skip around. Though the continuously reappearing reports on the appearance of new, mysterious aircraft of unknown construction should be considered with severe skepticism as the result of a sort of mass hypnotic, nevertheless, some of the detailed and coinciding accounts of technically trained observers deserve attention and permit one to draw conclusions as to the possible classification of these new aircraft. Okay. So far, the observations have been made mainly in the dark, which means that only the luminous parts of the craft are visible, Every report brings the description of the shining discs or circle. This is again a translation, so it doesn't sound as fluid as it might if it were written by someone who's fluent in English. But just bear with it. So they're saying that they're shining and circular. All right. If one should discard the absurd conjecture that these aircraft originate from beyond this Earth, so the doctor felt that that was absurd, then it is easy to arrive at the conclusion that the shining circles bear a relation to the exhaust of a rotary gas turbine. The possibility exists that the rotor of a turbine is used at the same time as a stabilizing top and is therefore fixed vertically to the level of the other turbine rings, which in the darkness produces the effect of the rings of Saturn. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. Go ahead, Clifford. Anything to say about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, the situation, even to this day we do it. The people, the small nucleus that know, that are in the know, the inner sanctum, they know that a lot of this technology is technology that was exploited from recovered debris of saucers that did not originate on this planet. So, you know, people are well aware of this advanced technology and are still very much in the dark about anything out there in the cosmos having any life on it or any intelligent life above that of the life here on this planet. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we exploit that to go ahead and form the paradigm of every culture on the planet of the Earth. Look, there may be life out there, but they haven't come here yet. We will go ahead and exploit the paradigm of every culture here on the Earth to believe that it is technically impossible for civilizations out there to visit us, just like even when we go ahead and achieve interstellar travel, which we may have already done. In the future, it is utterly impossible for us to go visit the others. Well, in 1962, we were planning to do just that, go out among the cosmos and find an inhabited, highly intelligent planet and learn from them by landing there and having a decade of people that was born on the craft itself learn the newborn, should I say, would fly the craft back with the knowledge of what we learned from that planet that we discovered.
Seems a little bit arcane and silly.
Oh, absolutely. To us now.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a 1962 document.
Sure.
When they were flying jets, and you know, we were really, you know, we were pushing it. When we came out with the F-94 and with full afterburners, we could go 1,200 miles an hour. You know, that was fast.
The Super Sabre could do that? Was that a night?
Well, the
what was the 94?
Starfire.
The Starfire, but before that, the Super Sabre. I don't think
the F-86 Super Sabre. Now, it
yeah,
could
but
do
that was
600.
subsonic. Yeah, that was not.
And if you really, really, really wanted to risk an accident and push the afterburners on it, you could get it almost to 900. But the situation is you're risking an accident on that.
Sure. Okay.
You know.
All right. Well, this
situation is that the greatest mystery. The greatest mystery is what we discovered from the German scientists who were actually working on this technology. Mm-hmm. And well, one guy on my Facebook got me upset because he went ahead, because we were talking about Germans. We were supposed to be talking about white supremacy.
Oh, please.
And,
come on.
Oh, you know, people do stupid things, but this right here, I decided to go ahead and the way I worded it, I said,
you know what? Facts are facts, Clifford. These are white Caucasians.
Facts and truth is
they happen to be German. They're not Italian.
The German
They're not
people
Austrian.
were highly intelligent, and most of them were not racist at all. You know what I'm saying?
Of course not.
It was a situation that was forced upon them by the controlling power that came into power, and they were numbered in the few.
Well, I think you have to look at it.
Controlled the masses.
I think we need to look at it in the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is
absolutely.
The war, for whatever reason, fought by the Rothschilds and the UK, Britain, to destroy Germany and the German people. All of them.
Oh, absolutely.
2 world wars were fought over that. Two to finally knock the Germans down and then continue the mop-up and destruction of German nationalism. Only because they were walking away from the British in terms of technology, the arts, the science, everything you can think of. Germany was stepping away from Britain at the turn of the century. There was a tremendous jealousy and rivalry there at the base of this, believe it. And then, of course, Hitler didn't want to play ball with the Rothschild banksters. He wanted to do his own financial empire, and that didn't work either. All right, let me go back to this paper real quick here. There is only one more question, writes Professor Ludwig, to be answered. Could such an aircraft carry enough fuel for worldwide journeys? This question is easily answered in the affirmative. In the first place, such an aircraft has a tremendous carrying capacity, as we have already seen, and in the second place, chemical research has made astounding developments in this respect. We know today, quite apart from atomic energy, carriers of energy of unsuspected power and duration. We already know about these. It should be remembered that the missiles of German anti-tank weapons were coated with chemical substances which melted up to 20 centimeters of steel plate within fractions of a second. Energy carriers of this type, if applicable to a gas turbine, should make an action radius possible which far surpasses that of gasoline engines. All right, he's talking about fuel. These are traditional power modalities, turbines, and so forth. Very interesting stuff, but there's nothing really paranormal about any of this. This is science as it was generally known in 1952, 50, 51, 52. At least published science, okay? Let's leave it at that.
But the one thing he wasn't even bringing up was, and remember again, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really go into it in technical terms, but they had such thing at that time that was still, to this day, it's kept in the dark for, a couple times it kind of leaked out, and that was plasma drive. Right.
Yeah, it did leak out a couple times, but not much. The future, he finalizes his paper with this statement. The future will show whether the flying discs are only the products of imagination or whether they are the results of a far advanced German science which possibly, as well as the nearly finished atomic bombs, may have fallen into the hands of the Russians. So he's speculating here that flying discs may be advanced in Russia, Soviet Russia, on the basis of German technology. Okay, well, interesting.
Absolutely, and if you read something that I wrote to Frank where I put there that you got to take into consideration that the German people were very intelligent. And the situation is that, once again, I'm going to say it, they came into possession of technology that did not evolve here on this planet.
Right.
And
Agreed.
they set out, barring no expense, to try to exploit that technology.
Wouldn't you? Of course you would. Everybody
absolutely.
would.
And our country did the same thing. That's why I'm trying to get some of these documents to you about Paperclip and about some of the things that we were doing trying to get the scientists out of there.
Right.
There were even times when the Russians couldn't get them. They would kill them so they wouldn't come into our possession.
Uh-huh.
And, the documents make all this clear because, it was like a mini-war of trying to get as many of the technicians and as many of the scientists as possible to go ahead and exploit the flying disc, bottom line. You had two projects. You had Project 1794 that was to try to make a disc craft here, and it was an aircraft, and it'd be flying. You also had Project Hazel that was to try to, and those looked like very unusual spaceships out of Star Wars, long before Star Wars was even considered, I thought of as a movie. Uh-huh. You had Silverbug that tied in with Project 1794. Then, of course, you had Project Horizon, which by 1963, we would have had a minimum of, by June of 1963, we would have had a minimum of a 12-man base on the moon. And we would have made that base with essentially the pieces of the spacecraft that we flew to the moon with. But, Congress wouldn't fund it, so it died a quick death. Mm-hmm. But not before it got off the ground, and it was showing it was going to be doing well. Project Diana, which I'm going to tell you right up front, Project Diana brought down the craft, and probably more than one, that crashed here in New Mexico and in Arizona, and probably even in Mexico.
Diana was the radar.
It was a high-resolution proclamating radar. In 1946, it made history. It was the first radar that bounced a radar beam off the moon back to Earth.
Huh.
And what a lot of other people don't know, they always talk about the dark side of the moon, dark side of the moon, dark side of the... It's a mystery. We don't know what's there. Well, guess what? We took pictures of the dark side of the moon. I have the documents.
In what year was this now?
What's that?
What year? Clementine, of course,
this was back
photographed the whole moon. Front, back, bottom, top.
Oh, absolutely. And, of course, what we did, we got the photographs from the back side of the moon from the Russians, because they were the ones that went ahead. I think it was Luna 9 that took the pictures. Uh-huh. But this was back in the early 60s that this happened, but it got its start all the way in the late 1950s. There was a race going on, and, we were trying to get the first man to the moon. Finally, the Russians gave up on it, and their idea, which we're utilizing today with the International Space Station, their idea was, okay, we don't have to get a person to the moon. We're going to go ahead and make a space station that's orbiting the Earth that can be used as a weapons platform, but at the same time, for peaceful uses, we can go ahead and fly people to the space station there and go ahead and plot them on a course that takes them directly to the moon and return the same way. But, the whole situation is people don't realize what was going on behind the scenes about the space race of the early years. Even before Kennedy stated, by the end of this decade, we're going to have a man on the moon.
Right.
Even before he stated that, the space race was on to get humans on the moon. And, the documentation, I used to talk about this, and, people wasn't listening, people wouldn't believe me. And I don't blame them, I understand. It would not be until November and December 2016 the documentation would be released. And also into January 2017. Uh-huh. But here again, there was no fanfare saying, we're releasing these documents talking about this. In 1967, NASA did a pamphlet, I don't know, about 87 pages, very quietly, talking about the lights on the moon. Now, lights on the moon, both the dark side and the side that you can see, go back 400 years. And, of course, we try to come up with a prosaic explanation. And that prosaic explanation is that this right here was nothing more than reflections of sunlight, of shiny objects that was on the moon. Remember that. Shiny reflective objects. And on the dark side, it was the same thing, but it was just the sun hitting them at a right angle. Well, these lights were moving, and all the other thing was that they were volcanic actions also. But these lights were moving, and they were like a consistent pattern of being like little round disc-type patterns that, if you have a volcano that erupts and you got that flow of lava, and it's not going to appear like a little disc or a little circle moving on the surface of the moon. But this was happening. But, it was still, they were still trying to downplay it. Early on, they were wondering, wait a minute, what is this? Well, enter the Apollo program. The Apollo program went there, and the Apollo program found out two things. And once again, I have to say it. I got the documents to back me up on what I'm about to say. The one thing was they would...
Clifford, hold on, Clifford. I'm sorry. Hold on. We have to pause. We're over time here at the end of the hour, so let me just... We'll come right back to that in a few minutes. If you do a search for lights seen on the moon, over the centuries or something like that. You'll find there's a whole chronology. NASA has put together a whole chronology of lights being seen, activities being seen on the moon going back 400 or 500 years. You can read it. It's public knowledge. It's there. It's not talked about. But people seeing things on the moon, this is not new. This is old news. All right. Back in just a few. Hang on. Okay, welcome back. This is a good one. All right. Now, when you look under Clifford's name in guess, this is, and you see the third data link there about German flying saucers. Look at the last, it's number 4. It's the bottom PDF there. This is a reproduction of an article. It's a copy of an article in a newspaper, May 13, 1953. Okay? This is good. I'm going to read some of this. This is very interesting. I believe this to be 99% true and credible. German engineer states Soviets have German flying saucer experts and plans. This is published in Athens. Vienna, Dateline, Special Services. According to recent reports from Toronto, a number of Canadian Air Force engineers are engaged in the construction of a flying saucer, in quotes, to be used as a future weapon of war. The work of these engineers is being carried out in great secrecy at the A.B. Rowe Company and factories. I think we've heard about this before. Okay. Now, this is interesting. Flying saucers have been known to be an actuality since the possibility of their construction was proven in plans drawn up by German engineers toward the end of World War II. Georg Klein, a German engineer, stated recently that though many people believe the flying saucers are of post-war development, they were actually in the planning stage in German aircraft factories as early as 1941. Klein said that he was an engineer in the Ministry of Speer, Albert Speer, the Minister for Armament and Ammunition for the Third Reich, and was present in Prague, Czechoslovakia, on February 14, 1945, at the first experimental flight of a German flying saucer. During the experiment, Klein reported the flying saucer reached an altitude of about 12,400 meters within just 3 minutes and a speed of over 2,200 kilometers per hour. Klein emphasized that in accordance with German plans, the speed of these saucers would reach up to 4,000 kilometers per hour. One difficulty, according to Klein, an engineer, was the problem of obtaining the materials to be used for the construction of the saucers. But even this had been solved by German engineers toward the end of 1945, and construction of the objects was scheduled to begin in a serial fashion. They were going to start cranking them out. Klein went on to state that 3 experimental models had been readied for tests by the end of 1944, built according to 2 completely different principles of aerodynamics. One type actually had the shape of a disc with an interior cabin and was built at the MITE, unidentified translation from the Greek, factories, which had also built the V-2 rockets. This model was 42 meters in diameter. The other model, which would be what, Clifford, 42 meters, 120 feet?
I think that the one that we finally wound up with in feet was 109 feet.
100 feet. That's pretty big. Okay, the other model had the shape of a ring with raised sides and a spherically shaped pilot's cabin placed on the outside in the center of the ring. This model was built at the Habermohl and Schreiber factories, blah, 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 in Germany. Both models had the ability to take off vertically and to land in an extremely restricted area like helicopters. During the last few days of the war, when every hope for German victory had been abandoned, the engineers in the group, stationed in Prague, carried out orders to destroy completely all of their plans on their model before the Soviet forces arrived. The engineers at the Mita factories in Breslau, this was in Germany after all, however, were not warned in sufficient time of the Soviet approach, and the Soviets, therefore, succeeded in seizing their material. Plans as well as specialized personnel were immediately sent directly to the Soviet Union under heavy armed guard. With the departure from Berlin of the creator of the Stuka, the Ju-87, who later developed the MiG-13 and MiG-15 in the Soviet Union. So the Soviets did capture some of the leading German engineers and scientists and took them quickly home, and the results were the German jets, transformed into MiG-13, MiG-15s in the Soviet Union. According to the report, nothing is known of the whereabouts of scientist engineer Habermohl since his disappearance from Prague. Shriver died recently in Bremen, and Mita, who escaped in a Messerschmitt 163, is in the U.S. Klein was of the opinion that the saucers are at present being constructed in accordance with German technological principles and expressed the belief that they will constitute serious competition to jet-propelled airplanes. He further stated, last part, that it was very possible to construct flying saucers for civilian air travel, that they could carry 30 to 40 passengers at a speed of approximately 4,000 kilometers per hour. He added, however, that the tremendous amount of material necessary for the construction did not warrant their being built exclusively for civilian air travel. His opinion was shared, he stated, by Giuseppe Belluzzo, an Italian specialist with whom Klein had been corresponding for some time. Okay, Clifford, take it away.
Okay, a lot of what he's saying there, I honestly do believe, but I don't think the Germans, the Russians, the Neanderthal man, the ancient civilizations, the U.S., Britain, I don't think any of us was capable of back engineering completely a flying saucer of extraterrestrial origin. I do believe, and I believe that the Germans got started on it long before anyone else.
Can you see, ladies and gentlemen, why the Germans were always hated by the British? Do you understand now? They were so far ahead of the British in virtually every arena. All right, that's not white supremacist talk. That's truth, simple truth. Go ahead.
And the situation is, they knew, and it was actually the French that was suppressing the German people to try to make sure they can never come to the point where they can come to power and have another world war. And
remember, the Germans were forced into these wars. We got to keep that on the table.
Absolutely. Right? I mean, the whole situation is that it was very cruel and very bitter what the French wanted, because they were afraid of the German people, period.
Yeah. The Treaty of Versailles after World War I, come on, one of the most horrific documents of its kind in known history, period. And,
the whole situation, I was in Germany when this movie came out about, the killing of 6 million Jews.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you right now, the Holocaust, that's not taught a whole lot about in Germany. But when this movie came out and it was aired, and the German government went along with it because, they thought, hate gets you nowhere. It came out, and I mean, the German people were shocked and stunned, and they actually started to ask America, well, tell us more about this. I suggested, study it. But, here again, that was not the German people per se. As my kids would say in that Job Corps, those were haters that did that, not the German people.
Let me qualify that. Whatever really happened was certainly done by hate. It was also done out of necessity. The Germans captured over 1 million Soviet soldiers at the outbreak of Operation Barbarossa. They ended up in labor camps. The labor camps were a partial bedrock of the whole German war effort. They had to keep these people alive. They had to keep them working. That's why Elie Wiesel in his alleged memoirs of Auschwitz, complained bitterly about being made to take 3 showers a day by the German guards. They had to keep these laborers healthy. They had 3 showers a day. Does that sound like a death camp to you? No, doesn't. Anyway.
Well, I got to talk to some of the German people when I was in Germany, and also some of the elderly people there. And
they didn't approve of putting anybody in labor camps.
There was some hate there, but I have to qualify that by saying it was not the German people per se.
No, and remember, please, in 1933, international Jewry, World Zionism, it's a frontline headline in the newspapers, declared all-out war on Germany in 1933. Economic war, any kind of war they could wage. So Germany had already been declared an enemy and under attack.
Absolutely.
For years.
The Germans did not want to declare war on the U.S. It was just that the Japanese kind of forgot to tell them that they were going to attack Pearl Harbor. And of course, we gave the Japanese an ultimatum about Southeast Asia, Indochina at the time. We gave them an ultimatum not to be building up their forces there on November 30th. That right there got it to where the powers that be in Japan decided there's not going to be any peace between the U.S. and us.
What really caused it, though, was... Clifford, what really caused the Japanese to fight in the war, they had no choice. We cut off their oil supplies. The Greater Southeast Asia Co-Prosperity Plan, read about that. We cut off their oil.
I've read the top secret documents on it.
There you go. Good job. All right.
And the situation is, it makes it clear right there about what happened on the 30th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Office of Naval Intelligence thought that they had already launched their naval forces because they briefed the White House that night, which would have been Saturday morning there in Hawaii, that the Japanese were going to attack that Sunday. So what happened was they put everybody on alert, and nothing happened. It wouldn't be until the next Sunday, December 7th, that would occur. But these, there's so much that's been released that deals with the ancient history written at the time, that was classified at the time, that people don't even bother to read nowadays. And, you learn a whole lot about our history from reading those documents that you're not going to get.
Well, look what we just learned from
we
that.
Know it is a lie.
Why would Georg Klein make that whole story up about Prague, Czechoslovakia, the first flight of a German UFO of that particular design, a saucer design, when we already have reports of this from the Italian that he was mentioning in that? He mentioned Giuseppe Belluzzo. Well, Belluzzo is one Italian who was releasing documents about the German UFO in Prague in 1945. So this comes from a couple of different locations. It's not a lie. It's true. They were way ahead.
It's absolutely true that they were working on a disc-shaped aircraft, period. It's absolutely true that there was material that was required to make that craft that was in very short supply because it didn't originate here on Earth. For example, one thing that we have right now for the tethers on some of our spacecraft, that initially did not originate on Earth, okay?
That's back-engineered.
What we called memory metal.
Interesting, yeah.
And we started working on memory metal in 1947, about 2-3 months after the crash here in Roswell.
Right.
And what is memory metal? It's metal that you can go ahead, fold up in your hand, open your hand, and it will go back to its original shape. Remember, at the crash of the UFOs here, right outside of Roswell, they found these pieces that looked like metal. You could wad them up, open your hand, and they go back to their original shape. And that started right up here at Sandia Laboratories.
Right. Clifford,
so
Clifford Stone. Clifford lives in
Roswell. Before we did.
Right. Clifford lives in Roswell. I still believe there are pieces of that ship Well, maybe 2 went down. We don't know, but at least one of them.
And
I think there's still
as many as 3.
Yeah, I've heard that too. There are people who still have pieces of that, little pieces. They didn't get it all. They got most of it.
Absolutely, but people are afraid to try.
Oh, they're not going to bring it
I just want to take a picture to send you a picture of something, right?
Right.
But trying to find, I don't keep it here in the house. And if you look at the first or second picture in the CIC files, what I want to send you a picture of looks very much like that, but it's going to be in color.
Uh-huh.
It's going to have a quarter close by it to where you can see, compare the quarter to the size of what the object is.
Right.
And the hand you see moving around, that's my hand.
Very good. All right, that would be fun. Okay. Did you get that link from Frank with all those pictures in it?
Oh, I'm not at my computer. I'm on.
Okay. All right. Well, you look at that later. That's, again, just go to Rense and type in German flying saucers, and I think you'll be surprised at what you see. Lots of pictures. By the way, that test...
I have a whole lot of pictures of German saucers, by the way.
Oh, I'd love to see them if you want to share sometime.
Well, I'm wanting to go ahead and send you... Yeah. I want to send you a whole lot of stuff. It's just trying to figure out what to send you now and what to send you later on.
Well, you just send what you want. I'm going to put your name up there, and we're going to start building a Clifford Stone archive of material. That'll happen in a few days, so we'll have that up, and we'll just add to it. Now, the test in Prague, the local people who lived near the factory where this craft was constructed and from which it flew were all every day they were told to keep your windows closed, your drapes shut. If we see anybody looking out, you will be shot. That was the ultimatum. So they had no leaks. They took it very seriously. No one got shot, but they were told that they stick their neck out, they're going to be. So
you know about the 2 United States senators that was going through Russia, and they saw from a test airfield there. Actually, I think it was 2 disc-shaped objects that took off from that airfield.
Right.
You know about that case, right?
I've heard of it once, maybe or twice, long ago.
You've never seen the government documents on it?
No.
Oh, that's probably because the CIA didn't release them until 2016, December.
Well,
I'll send you those documents on it.
Oh, great. Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. Now, we built a large disc-shaped craft, but they were conventionally propelled with jet engines. That we did do. We weren't... The Germans had something...
Project 1794.
There you go. The Germans had something called Die Glocke. It meant the clock. And it was... I'm not sure if we developed it or it was from off-planet, but it was a pretty wild, exotic power source. And there are actually, if you remember, you know this, Clifford, there's that round concrete structure with pillars and a round concrete rail around the top of it, maybe 20 feet off the ground. An open thing. You can walk right through it. You got pillar every 10 feet, then at the top was a round thing. Well, they tied this thing, this energy device, they tethered it to the inside of that, and then they would turn it on, and it would be held stable inside. It would jerk around and try and move. It was raw, unknown technological power, and it was called Die Glocke. And you can look it up, DIEGLOCKE, and see it. That is what is believed to have propelled this first craft that Klein talks about in 1945, the energy source from Die Glocke. Very interesting stuff.
And well, you know the force that they came up with, right?
It's red. What is it? Red something or another? I can't remember now.
Well, it's a makeshift of like today's car versus the T Model Ford.
Yeah, it was Mercury of some kind, wasn't it?
Power system, and we knew this for a long time. I was on par to what we call an electromagnetic drive. And I wish I could explain it completely about the many times of the reversing of the electromagnetic drives in that system, and it's about like a circle.
Right.
It creates its own space-time vortex, and it'll push it along in space-time, thereby not disturbing the air, and hence no sonic boom, because you're not disturbing anything.
Right.
The Earth actually sets in its own vortex. People don't know that, but it's true, and I can show you evidence for that. The other thing is that, yes, the Russians did get a whole lot of scientists that was working on the dish-shaped craft at the time, a lot of the material, but it wasn't enough. That's why, very open, to the pilots there in the former Soviet states. The rule, number one rule, was to give pursuit to the UFOs, to try to close in on them and try to make contact with them and tell them to land. If they don't land and they try to pull away, then you try to shoot them down.
Big mistake.
In one area, a air marshal knew of 40 different cases where they gave pursuit, but the pilots did not go ahead and open fire on them for the most part. During that time, they had 3 incidences in which the pilots went ahead, chased after the UFOs, closed in on them, and fired on them, at which time all 3 aircraft in the 3 different incidences crashed. Mm-hmm. 2 pilots were killed out of the 3. And, we got this not because the United States government decided, let's tell the people the truth. No, it was because the British government, working on a report on unidentified aerial phenomena, and released that report December 2000, and it was classified secret, eyes only. Wouldn't be until 2005, I believe it was, that they declassified it. And of course, when it was declassified, people were saying, the news media and everyone, well, they concluded there was nothing to UFOs. Well, what I just told you about what happened with the Russian pilots, that's from that report. And I'm sorry, temperature inversions don't do that. Atmospheric phenomena don't do that. There's no temperature inversion, no atmospheric phenomena, no astronomical phenomena that takes evasive action against an aircraft. Uh-huh. In all instances, they were registered on radar, they were visually observed, and of course, you got 2 dead pilots that can, as testimony that something was going on up there.
Well, Frank Fascino's book, Shoot Them Down, have you read that one? All right, Frank spent 17 years putting that book together. Amazing research, all about the years 53 and 54, and I guess early 55, in which the Air Force was operating under this shoot them down dictate. He says
the
they lost.
Was given July 27th, 1952.
Yeah, well, Frank has documented all of that, and I think he said they lost at least a couple hundred aircraft, and probably a couple hundred aircrew. Before they reversed the order.
Against it, don't you? Albert Einstein told him not to do that.
Well, Albert was one of his better decisions, no doubt. All right, hold on, Clifford. We have to pause again. We'll come right back with more. Okay, welcome back. Talking to Clifford Stone about a lot of different things. The guest section, if you look under there, you'll find 3 links. Each link has several PDFs. I've quoted from a couple of them. They're all well worth reading. They're fascinating. And they're obviously of historical significance, to put it mildly. Go ahead, Clifford.
Okay, where were we? Oh, about the Russians, yes.
Just about the Russians.
The Russians were desperately trying together, just like we were, the information that they could get from UFOs. And if they could go ahead and have them crash, that would be great, because then they can go ahead and get the debris and attempt to back engineer it.
Right.
Well, we had been doing that for some time. Like right now, they try to say that they're not doing it. And what happened was that I think it was in 85, they made the decision to change the code names for Blue Dust and Blue Fly, because they'd been compromised. They were publicly known. Just like Project Sign, it became publicly known. Then they thought they were going to get rid of the public relations program, and they tried that, but they were still getting too many reports in. And the Pentagon went ahead and said, get in touch with Wright-Patterson, tell the Foreign Technological Division, we still have to investigate UFOs. So, they were closing it down. There was not going to be any investigation of UFOs as standalone unit. So when they called, they said, well, wait, they gave us orders to send all this stuff to the archives for them to hold it there. And they said, nope, you guys never closed. You just had to change your name. Okay, what's our name? Well, no one had a name. They told them to come up with something. Since nobody wanted to be identified with the investigation, they called it Project Grudge. And, the word grudge speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, yeah.
So later on, they went ahead and they saw that UFOs were becoming more of a priority. They changed the name, and it became a permanent picture there, where they would gather the information, and they would share that information with other organizations, if need be, to try to come up with some solutions to what caused the sighting. What a lot of people were not aware of, at the same time that Grudge became Project Blue Book, the investigation on the people who did the legwork was, in fact, the Air Intelligence Service Squadron, at the time known as 4602nd Air Intelligence Service Squadron. And they were assigned by the Pentagon, the Office of Air Intelligence, to do the investigations. Then if they felt that it was necessary to go ahead and call on other scientific organizations within the Air Force, or even outside, to try to help get some final conclusion as to what it was, that they would be the one making that decision. Once they concluded that the object had a positive identification, then that would be forwarded to Project Blue Book. Uh-huh. If they didn't conclude that, it became part of the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force's Air Intelligence Service Squadron's property to be shared with the NSA, the National Security Agency at the time, the NRO, and the CIA. CIA having operational control over it all. If, like a case that was investigated by the Air Intelligence Service Squadrons became public knowledge, then a watered-down, possibly even classified at a secret level, which meant any information that dealt above top secret would not be part of that file, would then be placed in the Blue Book files for later public viewing if it would ever come to that. Good example is in 1955 when in the Pacific Theater they were having all kinds of UFOs. And the Air Intelligence Service Squadron was gathering all that information. There was no plausible explanation for the sightings that was taking place. They saw that they were under intelligent control. All of that information went to the National Security Agency, sent to them by the Air Intelligence Service Squadron. And there's paperwork that shows that to be the case. When it got to the National Security Agency, the National Security Agency to date has not released the finalized intelligence product that was formulated by the information they got from the Air Intelligence Service Squadron. So, there's a whole lot that the NSA to date has not released. Today, we still try to go ahead, get any type of debris from what we call UFOs that we can, and,
we must have several warehouses full of the things by now.
We probably do. I mean, I've always said, and people don't understand this, but if they stop to think about it, they will. We're interested in anything that we can recover from our visitors, up to and including their garbage.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Hey, dumpster diving, I don't care what planet you're on, you can learn a lot.
Hey, I get my ink and my paper and stuff. I go out and I try to find aluminum cans. I sell those. Good
for you. All right. Well, for some reason, Clifford, you still have and are getting remarkable cooperation, and they're using you as clearly a primary vector for release of information, revelation. So this is good. You've earned the trust of somebody over the years.
Yeah, but I have to be careful. I can't.
Oh, I know.
It's bad. You can't expose names,
Of course not.
I got friends that still hold high-level security clearances.
Yeah.
And every 5 years they come up for a renewal. And I hope Paula doesn't mind, but I'm going to bring her name in here.
Wait. What are you going to do here?
With me, and the situation is they will ask these people, and she's met a couple of them. They will say, okay, what relationship do you have with U.S. Army Sergeant Clifford Stone, retired, and Paula Harris? And one of my friends, who was a quantum physicist, went ahead and told DIA when they sent their investigator to ask him those questions, he told him point blank, you know what, that's none of your business. And they says, well, you know, if you don't answer our questions, then we will not go ahead and approve you for the security clearance. He says, you know what, you go ahead, take that security clearance, stick it where the sun don't shine, I quit. And he did. And I felt bad, and I said, I hate it that you lost your job because of me. And he said, no, it had nothing to do with you. He says, I agree 100% what you are doing. Then he told me a story that happened to him when he was very young. Then he told me, he says, with your efforts, you're helping a lot of people whose names you will never know, who you will never see, and you will never hear from. But with you, it makes it to where they have that freedom of saying, I told my family what happened to me. Here's proof, because I never met this person, yet he's talking about things I told you about when they happened to me. And, it gets to be pretty, I know people who've lost their families. I know even military people who went ahead, who always believed that, God made the universe just for us here on Earth. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Nothing.
And the whole situation is when they're all of a sudden confronted with something existing beyond planet Earth, many of them wind up taking their own life because they can't deal with it. And I had a problem with that. Well, then I had a problem how good example, the Men in Black. Now, we know that in 1966, the OSI, the Air Force's Office of Special Investigation, released a memo to all commands entitled Impersonation of Air Force Officers, stating that, they had received information not verifiable, and of course I understand why they put it that way, that people were going around contacting UFO witnesses claiming to be representatives from the Air Force. And all these were to be reported to the Office of Special Investigation, which was the Air Force's the equivalent of FBI. It would not be, and I just got these documents 2 days ago. I was supposed to send you a copy of them. It's only a one page, but it's a 2-page document because there was a flyer that was fixed, and that flyer is still classified. But it goes back to 1965, I think. Impersonation of CIA agents. And they were making it clear 3 other divisions within the CIA were to report any information that came in from the field of people impersonating CIA agents. And what do CIA agents wear? Not the trench coats. They wear dark suits. Get the connection?
Yeah. Funny.
So, the whole situation is that they'll try to downplay it. When this was released, there was no fanfare. If it wasn't for a little help from a friend of mine, I would have never known that document even existed.
Well, as you say,
there's all kinds of stuff out there.
As you say, exactly. There are so many pages now released, maybe hundreds of thousands ultimately. I don't even know. How are you going to find things? You really it's not coded for searching, so you're going to have to go looking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I do, I use pro words to find information. For example, within the archives of the government agencies, so let's say like for the V2, I go ahead and my pro word is V-2. Don't put V2. You'll get over 60,000 documents. There are 906 documents dealing with the V2 rocket program within the CIA files that have been released. But if
how many was that?
906.
Wow. All right.
Now, with that being said, V2, but for V1, V2, V-1, V-2, now you come up with over 9,000 documents. 32 documents standalone on V-1 rocket. Mm-hmm. But, you have to be very careful, because if you put V-1 or V-2 or V-3, they will give you everything that might even be coded having nothing to do with the rocket program at all. So, I go ahead and I hit up on that, and like with this one of my friends says, you'd probably be very interested in a document that they released here just a couple of years ago, impersonation of CIA agents. I said, well, I got the one from the Air Force. Is that what you're talking about? Says, the Air Force is not CIA agents. Check it out. Well, I did. Sure enough, there it was. Is there anything else dealing with it? Yes, but it's all classified. So, and the other thing, when you get these, you made mention of it yourself, even with the things dealing with the UFOs, dealing with the Robinson Panel report, and if you read the documentation on what happened in 52, you see that there was a major effort to keep the NSA from issuing the NSA NSC National Security Council. There was a major effort afoot to keep the National Security Council from issuing a National Security Council intelligence directive that have brought the entire intelligence community into the investigation and research into UFOs. We already know what they are. We already know some of the places they're coming from. And we don't want everyone putting their noses to the grindstone trying to find out what's going on, because the best kept secret are those secrets that are known by the one or the few. Within the CIA, there's a small group that knows. That group is mainly associated with the CIA's office, or OSI, Office of Scientific Investigations. And there are millions of documents yet to come out. Literally tens of thousands of documents that deal with UFOs being an interplanetary nature. Right. At the same time, many countries began to find out that there was something more to the UFO phenomenon, that there was an intelligence not of this world behind it. Many of the countries then immediately started to try to make that technology their own. They went ahead and tried to exploit it.
Oh, sure.
Back engineer it and make it to where it's our technology. And we do this on a daily basis. The Russians do it on a daily basis. The British eventually caught on and started doing it. But long before the Second World War, the Germans came into possession of extraterrestrial knowledge.
They had some kind of they had a deal. Contact. They had a deal with somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, somebody wanted to go ahead and try to stop, the history of what went on with the Germans prior to the Second World War, during the Second World War, and after. That's totally crazy, because there's a lot of questions that can be answered by studying that classified history. But you have to, it's like, going up to a dam, and you want to get the water out, so you take an ice pick and pick away at the concrete, trying to break a hole where the water can start pouring through that dam. Well, it's the same thing with government bureaucracy when it comes to the classified documents. It's not that they don't exist, it's just that by presidential proclamation, every year those documents have to be reviewed. Now, with the CIA, I'll tell you right now, they have what's called a CREST team. Every year they review those records to determine what can be released and what can't be released. You have records, you've seen them, that go all the way back to the 40s, the 30s, the 50s, even the 60s, that there's information that's blotted out in the interest of national security. And I'm stating right now that there is no plausible explanation for why there should be any rendated documents from that time era. They should all be clear, legible, and even with the Robinson panel, the clear, legible documents that did exist, they didn't declassify those until, 10, 15 years after they released the same document that was very, very difficult to read, if you could read it at all. So, the whole situation is that we need to go ahead and get them to start opening this stuff up. The other thing is, there is a memorandum of understanding with many of the branches of the U.S. government. The Air Force started it with the National Archives that holds on to all the documentation. Even if the documentation is classified, protected under the Sensitive Compartmented Information Program, it all goes into the National Archives. But there was, and I can send you a copy of that memorandum because I have it, memorandum of understanding on how to try to avoid releasing some documents under the Freedom of Information Act.
Right.
Simply because these agencies don't want them to become public knowledge, and many thousands of documents fit that category when it comes to UFOs.
Well, it's a huge secret that really isn't a secret if you know where to look. And
it's a self-keeping secret, as we used to say.
Yeah, but looking into the work you're releasing and the data, and listening to you talk, anybody, and we've had so many wonderful programs with truly great American patriots like yourself.
Thank you.
There just can be no doubt. I mean, it's not even up for discussion. It is. It's a fact. And why do people always say, well, the government hasn't said? Who cares what the government says? If you don't know the government is crooked and rotten by now, I guess you never will. We don't need the government to tell us what's real. We can figure it out on our own.
Governments lie.
That's all. First, last, and only.
Their own agenda. It has nothing to do with national security or in the best interest of its people.
Right. Of course.
In many instances, the lies governments tell is damning to the people, and very much so here in the United States. The lies that the U.S. government tells, particularly when it comes to UFOs, does more harm to the American people than it does good.
It also harms themselves. All they're doing is damaging their credibility. The problem is they don't give a damn. They don't care. So,
absolutely. Well, what I always visualize is a painter painting the floor. They paint themselves into a corner and trying to figure out how they're going to get out of there. Well, they got no choice. They're going to have to wait till the paint dries. Well, eventually disclosure is going to come out because proverbially the keepers of the secret have painted themselves into that corner. And an event is going to happen that they are not going to be able to keep quiet. That is going to be such a tremendous event, the whole world is going to know about it. Then the truth has to come out. And if Frank shared some of the information I put there, in the last, or next to the last email I sent him with documents, I put down there about what happens when the government has to tell the truth. And, the whole situation is no government can come out and say 100% that our visitors are not hostile. All they can do is say, to date, we have found no indication that they are hostile, that all hostile intent has been made by us, and at times we have lost craft and people as a result, an indirect result of actions we have taken. And I've been around when some of these things have happened. And I've, been around when they briefed us and always said, not all contact will be of a friendly nature. But with that being said, it's just like, not everybody in the United States go out and rob banks, go out and rob the local mom and pop store on the corner. But we have a criminal element that does just that without any thought about it whatsoever. Our visitors are no different. We look at them as being like cartoon characters. Well, they're not cartoon characters. They have cultures, civilizations just like us. They have loves, likes, dislikes. There are many things that you could even say that border on hatred with them. But they have that high degree of intelligence and understanding that make them reason things out. But even with that, they still have that rogue element that does very bad things that even in their eyes would be a criminal act. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do now, very important for us, is not to try to identify the differences between the various cultures and races of entities that are coming here to this planet to visit us for whatever reason, but we need to start looking at the similarities between us and try to understand those similarities, because eventually contact is going to be made on an open level. then it's going to be contact with everyone. We're all going to be having interaction with our visitors. I
agree. So what's next, Clifford? You're going to keep pushing the material out this way?
Yep, until the day I die. I want to get it out. I feel like there's so much that I've done in this one lifetime.
Yeah.
But so little time.
No, that's the truth.
Get it out.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You were first on this program over 20 years ago. Long time.
Oh, I started well over 40 years, my friend.
I mean, on this program.
Oh, yes, I know. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. We had some good times.
I was scared to death when I first started talking.
No, you did great. What we're going to do is build a Clifford Stone special featured story on the right, like Dr. Ray Keller, like Bill Tompkins, and we're going to build an archive of information as you send it in. We'll continue to build it, and it'll be a wonderful resource for people. They can read the data as it really
I appreciate
appears.
That.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you for being here again. We'll talk soon. My God, we have, like I say, enough to do 100 programs already. So keep it up and be careful and don't let them hassle you. You're doing great.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Good night,
I'd like to say
go ahead.
Good night to you and your listeners, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All righty. Take care. Okay, Clifford Stone. And thanks to Frank Chile for arranging this again.